You know, not all of the platformers on the SEGA Genesis were terrible. Just most of them. But I can tell you one that wasn't. Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Yes, this was Sonic back in his heyday before failure after miserable failure pushed him down to the bottom of the barrel, where he currently remains, though many of you might want to argue otherwise. Has this classic withstood the test of time? Let's find out. Sonic 3 is about Sonic, a hedgehog. No. Yeah, that one. And his sidekick Tails, a fox. They're trying to keep the evil Robotnik from either taking over or destroying the world. I'm not sure which. The game doesn't make it clear. Alright, so the plot isn't going to be winning any awards. But it does get points for creativity. I mean, a blue hedgehog and a fox fighting an evil genius? I'm pretty sure that story has never been told before. Well, what can it do? Move left, move right, jump, normal stuff. Variable jumping is present and will factor into the levels. You can also spin dash by holding down and repeatedly pressing the jump button. It helps you gain a quick burst of speed. Acceleration is also a big deal. Sonic gains speed kinda slowly, but has a pretty high top speed. Those are the bare bones mechanics at play. Rest assured, these simple mechanics allow for a wide variety of challenges and levels. With that in mind, let's move on to the first level, Angel Island. A few features span all of the levels in this game, so I'll just mention them all here. First, ramps. Gaining enough speed and catapulting yourself to high places is a common way to find secrets. Second, springs. Oh, you're gonna have a love-hate relationship with these things by the end of this. They're also good for reaching high places, or making you want to commit suicide, depending on the situation. Rings are the most common pickup in the game. Getting 100 of them will give you an extra life. If you get hit, all your rings will scatter, but if you don't have any rings when you get hit, you'll lose a life. Angel Island isn't a difficult level. Since it's the very beginning of the game, it serves as an introduction to the mechanics. In spite of this, it still has plenty of variety. Sometimes you'll be swinging from ropes. I don't know, it seems to be missing something if it doesn't have this music to it. Sometimes you'll be climbing up platforms that are flowing down a waterfall. You may even find yourself being chased by a giant death chip trying to viciously murder you. These little novelties help to keep the level consistently interesting. Every time you think you've seen everything Sonic has to throw at you, you get something new. So where's that Robotnik character anyway? We haven't seen much of him so far. And here's our main antagonist, Dr. Robotnik, who likes to build giant death machines to kill blue hedgehogs. I guess he's got a lot of spare money lying around. Hello, Chase Bank? Yeah, I'd like to take out a $50,000 loan. Oh, it's for a 50-foot tall robot that looks like... I mean, I'm opening a bar and grill. This boss is simple. Whenever he's behind the waterfall, you can't hurt him. But whenever he pops out to shoot fireballs at you, that's your chance to attack. Here's a gameplay pro tip for you. If you're having trouble beating this boss, you should probably just give up and play a different game. After a number of hits, Robotnik's machine explodes, and you can set the Beanie Babies free from their prison. With that out of the way, we can meet our other antagonist, Knuckles. We'll talk more about him later, but for now, remember him fondly as the douche that sent you to the water. I'm sure some of you are saying, but if we go through every single level like this review is going to take forever. To which I say, you probably shouldn't talk to inanimate objects. It's a good way to end up in a mental hospital. Besides, we're not going to go through and talk about every single level in such detail. We're going to go through and hit some main points to know what the game's about. Hydro City, or Hydrocity, whichever, has a few important things to teach us about Sonic. First, he's apparently made of lead. And second, he can't breathe underwater. Some of the long water slide sections are pretty interesting, even if they aren't difficult to get through. From all that, the level probably seems perfect. It's definitely not perfect. One problem with this level and older Sonic games in general is the surprise style of some of the hazards. Often the margin between a hazard appearing on the screen and you hitting it is really small. Paradoxically, for getting about a hedgehog who can run really fast, it sure punishes you a lot for doing so. Now I can already hear the argument of, it's supposed to be hard, you just suck at it, ringing in my ears. This is the kind of difficulty you might find in I Wanna Be the Guy, and be okay with it because that's what the game's going for. But in this game, which has lives and game overs, it's a bit out of place. Sure, this game has its unfair moments, but the levels contain plenty of legitimate challenge for those looking for it. Let's talk briefly about the boss of this level. But this will be the last regular level boss that I mention because there's one at the end of every single act, so that's too many to mention and give adequate time to. At the end of Act 2, Robotnik always comes in with some new gimmick to kill Sonic. He or he sets up water in a fan and drops bombs. I think it's time for another gameplay pro tip. A real one this time. Whenever one of the bombs he drops is about to go off, try to be above it. The explosion will catapult you up and you can get multiple hits in. Because of how many bosses there are in this game, they tend to be a bit on the simple side. Usually they have one, maybe two attacks that they can levy against you at once. And it's really not a big deal to beat any of them. Alright, with Hydrocity, whatever, out of the way, now we can look at the next three levels. We've got Marble Garden Zone, Carnival Night Zone, and Ice Cap Zone. I really can't say that any of these levels is unique. They all follow essentially the same design structure. That said, they each have a few things that are notable about them. Marble Garden is huge. Both acts of this level are quite expansive and have a number of paths that you can follow. At times, getting lost is a bit of a problem. The level is extremely non-linear and invites a considerable amount of exploration, especially compared to some other levels in the game. There is one pretty major problem with having levels like this in a Sonic game. The older Sonic games had a time limit. It's not really stated, but if you're in a level longer than 10 minutes, the game will kill you until you run out of time. Big expansive levels that invite exploration shouldn't have a time limit. It just restricts the player and keeps them from experiencing a lot of the content that you put a lot of work into adding. The time limit, it was a poor decision. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to Ice Cap Zone, because it illustrates an important point. But you can't possibly do Ice Cap Zone before Carnival Night Zone, that's out of order! Relax, take a deep breath. There is a method to this, just trust me. Have you ever heard of the idea of pacing in game design? Well, Ice Cap Zone is an excellent illustration of it. For those of you who don't know, pacing refers to the level of tension the player has at any given point. It rises and falls as you go through the level, gradually building up to the climax. He said climax. It's at the end. Anytime the player perceives a threat or has to perform an action, the tension felt increases. The snowboarding section started out with the tension high, but it came to a stop at the end, bringing the tension back down. The sections of safe land between platforming sections are meant to give the player a break for a moment before bringing the tension back up again. These declines make the peaks of tension all the more effective. Now that we have a very brief and simplified idea as to what pacing is, we can go ahead and move on to Carnival Night Zone. You'll see why that was important in a minute. I'm sure veterans of the Sonic series suddenly have an eerie feeling that they've seen this level somewhere else. Can't quite put your finger on it? Here, let me help you out with that. That's right, Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2. The flashy art style, and even the coloring scheme to a certain extent. So, while these levels look the same and they sort of feel the same, are they comparable in terms of gameplay? No, actually, although I kind of wish they were. In line with other levels in the game, Carnival Night Zone has many areas that you just run through really quickly. The pace only slows down in a few areas, so it really doesn't play that much different from the others. Casino Night, meanwhile, had a slow pace for a Sonic level. You were often placed in pretty tight corridors with your movement restricted. And the pinball-themed sections made it a slow process to move from one area to another. It was always pretty tempting to play the slot machines. Gambling. Now it's time for that little lesson in pacing to pay off. Having a different pace than all the other levels around it can set a level apart and make it more memorable compared to the others. In this case, I would probably call Casino Night Zone the better level. Its slower pace helped set it apart from all the other levels in Sonic 2. Did it have its annoyances? Yes, it had its annoyances. Some of those bumpers, you could get caught in almost continual loop for a good bit of your life. But Carnival Night Zone just feels like all the other levels in Sonic 3. It has very little to set it apart. The pace is the same. It just sort of fades into the background, especially since it's in the middle of the game. I think it's time to end our talk about specific levels. We have a few miscellaneous items to take care of before we bring this review to a close. I know we haven't talked about any of the and Knuckles levels, but I think that might have to wait for another review. This review's already dragging on pretty long. There are 3 shields in the game, and each one puts one more mistake between you and death. First is the bubble, which keeps you from drowning. The fire shield protects you from a lot of fire attacks. Trust me, that one's going to be pretty useful, as there are quite a few enemies that use fire attacks in the game. And the lightning shield, which springs on rings like a magnet. It protects you from lightning attacks too, but they're pretty rare. If you're getting bored playing as Sonic in this Sonic game, you weirdo, there are 2 other characters that you have to choose from. First, there's Tails, who's pretty much like Sonic, except he can fly. It's pretty easy to maneuver around the levels with him, and being able to fly certainly takes a lot of the challenge out of some of the levels. Honestly, if you're going to be Tails, you might as well just put a bow in your hair and go prance around in a flower garden. It's pretty much the same thing. In case you aren't a prepubescent girl, Knuckles is also available. Unlike Sonic, he can glide through the air and climb up walls. I would probably consider him the hard mode of the game, since most of his sections are a lot more difficult than Sonic's. He also doesn't jump quite as high, so look out for that. Oh, by the way, I know we didn't cover this level. This is one of the and Knuckles levels, so consider it a kind of preview as to what's to come. We've just got one more thing I want to cover in this review before we cut it off. Hidden throughout the levels are a number of giant rings. Touching one of these rings will transport you to a bonus level. The goal on these bonus levels is simple. You just want to collect all of the blue spheres without touching a red one. Touching a red one will kick you back to the level, and you won't get a chance to retry from that ring. Outlining blue spheres and red spheres will cause them to change into rings, and collecting all the rings will net you a perfect, which is worth a pretty good sum of points. Collect all of the blue spheres to get a Chaos Emerald. So what good are Chaos Emeralds? Well, I'd say if you took Jesus, Optimus Prime, and Velociraptors and mixed them all together, it still wouldn't be quite as awesome as what you get for all the Chaos Emeralds. You get one of the most overpowered things in all of gaming. Super Sonic.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
Yeah. He runs faster, jumps higher, is invincible. Really the only things that can touch him are being crushed, drowning, or falling into a bottomless pit. Once you get those 50 rings, the level might as well be over. That's more or less all there is to say about Sonic 3. We haven't gotten to the end Knuckles part. We'll get to that in another review. Just keep checking back, and one of these days, whenever I happen to feel like it, I'll finish that off. In the meantime, I hope this nice long talk about Sonic's greatness, past greatness, will tide you over until then. Thanks for watching.